ADATA XPG V2 memory kits are optimized for the latest Intel gaming platforms. Check the link in the video description for more details. Welcome to my unboxing and overview of the Razer Blade 14 from, well, Razer. So first of all, it comes packed in soft foam, so it's already my favorite notebook. No, just kidding. Okay, it does come packed in soft foam, but it doesn't get too many points for that because it's an extremely expensive notebook. For a 256 gig configuration, you're looking at about 2 Gs, putting it right up there in the Apple echelon in terms of pricing. But the real question is, does it deserve to be there? In terms of the unboxing experience, we're gonna do a very, very short version of it. This is what the box looks like. Foam, typical green, beautiful Razer packaging as we've come to expect from them. And other than that, there's not a whole lot in here. So there's a little bundle of what you typically come to expect. So you get a couple of Razer stickers as well as a microfiber cloth. Honestly, it's not gonna do you a whole lot of good. The black finish is absolutely beautiful, but you can never get it quite perfect as far as I can tell. I even tried using some alcohol in order to get it off, but honestly it really isn't that bad either. At least it's black, unlike these silver finishes that the fingerprints really do show up on. You also get a letter from the CEO and chief gamer of Razer, as well as a quick start guide. Not gonna worry too much about any of that. Other than that, all you'll find in the box is their very sleek, very sexy power brick. This is a 150 watt power brick, but as you can see from my traditional phone size comparison, here's an HTC One, is extremely small for a 150 watt brick. Razer claims they spent several times as much as most manufacturers will on a power brick in order to have it fit in this form factor. This was extremely important to them because they were going for portability as well as gaming performance with this particular machine. So speaking of portability, it is only 0.66 inches thick. So we're gonna go ahead and give you a look at it physically. Here's that phone comparison for you again. It weighs only 4.1 pounds. It is 14 inch and it is not an Ultrabook because it has, well, not because, but it has much more performance than an Ultrabook in spite of the fact that the form factor looks an awful lot like an Ultrabook. This has a full-fledged GTX 765M. Razer has done nothing in terms of downclocking that graphics card. It also has a Core i7 quad-core processor. So that, my friends, is what makes this not an Ultrabook. It is a 4702HQ, which means it runs at 2.2 gigahertz base, 3.2 gigahertz boost, so you can see we're running Crisis One right now. So the answer is, can it run Crisis? Yes, I'm running it very high, 1600 by 900 at the native resolution. The keyboard is quite well spaced out considering that this is a 14-inch notebook. The speakers are quite loud. Although, as with most notebook sound, it's not the most, rich, gorgeous sound you've ever heard, but it is certainly functional for gaming, even in an environment where there's a fair amount of ambient noise, such as at a LAN party. So back to the keyboard here, there are 20 different incremental steps for the keyboard backlight, all the way from completely off to an extremely vibrant green that reminds me of the Black Widow Ultimate 2013. The keyboard is also fully compatible with Synapse 2.0, meaning you can remap every key to whatever you want and program advanced macros. I wish there was a number pad, but given that they would have had to sacrifice the spacing of it, and it is actually quite a satisfying tactile keyboard. You can hear there's a bit of a click. The one key that the two keys I would really complain about are the spacebar. It has a bit of a tinny sort of plasticky feel to it, and then I don't really like arrow pad configurations like this, but I don't really find myself using the arrow keys much these days. The touchpad I've seen other people complain about, but I personally didn't find it that obnoxious. People were saying they prefer a clicky touchpad. I don't. I prefer dedicated buttons at the bottom, and that is exactly what you find with the Razer Blade 14. However, there was a little bit of glitchiness in fine movements sometimes when selecting icons and then clicking by touching the touchpad. It's shown up a couple times for me, but not a ton. Hopefully this is something that they can fix in sort of a silent revision after the review units go out. This is a review unit, not a finished one. For physicality, it's very bare bones. So along the right-hand side of the notebook, we find USB 3, HDMI, and a security lock. On the back of the notebook, whoa, there's nothing. Where are all the air vents? I'll show you that later, don't worry guys. On the left side of the notebook, we find power in. It fits very snugly. This is a huge oversight on one of my notebooks, an MSI gaming notebook I got a few years back. I think they've addressed it now, but the power plug just slips out a lot of the time. So I do like to see a snug power plug, would prefer magnetic. 2 USB 3.0 ports on this side, as well as a headphone microphone combo jack. Then on the front, we find a whole lot more of nothing. The hinge is very easy to open. So, I mean, I guess this is kind of unfair to it, but even holding it up in the air, I can get that separated. You don't have to wedge 2 fingers in there in order to get it open. And how does the ventilation work? How the devil did they fit a GTX 765M, and hold on, I'm just gonna turn the sound off, a GTX 765M and a quad core into this form factor. 2 ventilation fans down here. So we're running Crisis right now. Actually, I'm gonna unpause the game so you guys can get some idea of how loud these fans are. They are louder than a silent notebook, but here, check this out. So I'm putting this right next to my boom mic so you guys can see what I'm doing here. They are quieter than my Aspire S7, which is more of an ultrabook, but doesn't have a GPU and doesn't have, actually, I don't even think it has about a 6-hour battery life. So battery-wise, you can get anywhere from around 5 to 6 hours out of it in a light to medium usage case scenario. However, when you're gaming, obviously that's going to be significantly reduced. So these 2 fans on the bottom here vent air, up here. So it's actually completely stealthed. Up at the top of the keyboard, there are 2 major exhaust ports here and here. Now, the advantage of this design is that you don't have to look at any exhaust vents. The disadvantage is it means the top of the notebook does get very toasty in a gaming scenario. And because it's using an aluminum unibody chassis, that heat does tend to spread out a fair bit. So what we're gonna be doing near the end of the video is I'm gonna take my temperature probe right here, and I'm going to be running this game, and I'm going to stick the probe to various parts of the notebook to give you guys an idea of how exactly it runs. Even if it means the heat gets spread out, that's a good thing for one reason, because it's part of what allows that massive power inside this notebook to be possible in this form factor. And aluminum compared to plastic, there's just no comparison. There's no flex to it. It feels good. It reminds me a lot of something like the black MacBook Pro back in the day before Apple kiboshed that, which I think was one of the most beautiful notebooks ever. It's stylish and elegant. So on the top, you've just got a couple of subtle accents as well as an illuminated Razer logo. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it back on so you can see the illumination there. On the side, the only thing that reveals that this is a gaming notebook is the tiny green accents in things like the USB ports and then the green backlit keyboard. Other than that, it's something that you could easily sit in a boardroom meeting with and you wouldn't have to feel like a total weirdo. Part of the way that it achieves that long battery life, making it suitable for business use, is the fact that it employs NVIDIA Optimus technology. So that means that the dedicated graphics card pretty much turns off when you're not using it. And Intel's new Haswell 4th generation core processors are so efficient when they're only being used a little bit that, well, all of a sudden this is possible. I remember saying when the original Blade launched, this is interesting, but what I'm really excited for is next gen. Next gen is finally here. Now, with that said, this notebook is not perfect. It lacks an SD card reader. It lacks a dedicated hardwired Ethernet port. However, the wireless end solution does use Bigfoot killer optimizations in order to prioritize your gaming traffic, so that's at least better than nothing. But the one that really bothers me is the screen. So I'm gonna get you guys to come in and have a look at the screen. So check this out. So that's your straight on viewing angle. If you guys have been watching my channel for any amount of time, you'll know that I am a huge advocate for non-TN panels. And this panel is about as TN as it gets. The colors are not as vibrant or deep as you'll get with an IPS, PLS, or even a VA panel of some sort. And the viewing angles are quite, well, they're some of the worst I've seen on a notebook that costs more than, you know, between $500 and $1,000 in a very long time, and I found that very disappointing. I, for one, am not disappointed about the resolution. 1600 by 900 is very acceptable, considering that a 765M is not, you know, a desktop GTX 780. So you're better off to have slightly lower resolution natively and be able to run at native res rather than running at a non-native res in your games. And the pixel density at 14 inches for a 1600 by 900 screen is actually not that bad. Like I don't mind that at all. although I've seen complaints about that from other reviewers. This particular configuration has 8 gigs of RAM, a 256 gig SSD, a 70 watt-hour battery, Bluetooth 4.0, Windows 8, as well as a built-in HD webcam. And some of the things about this notebook that I also find exceptional are, check this out, partly due to the fact that it's an SSD, partly due to the fact that it's extremely fast, and partly due to the fact that it has no bloatware. Here's our wake from sleep time. Also, it boots from cold in about 12 seconds. So this is, I mean, yay Windows 8. It's one of the few things that really truly is great about it. Speakers are, I think I already covered that, loud enough for gaming, but you know, nothing really super special. And I think that pretty much covers it. So let's go ahead and show you guys some Crysis gameplay, as well as give you some temperature readings from various points on the notebook. To start our thermal tests, we went with what we found was the hottest spot where air was being exhausted from the Blade 14. So that was right at this point, right here. And it's about 50 degrees when we measure the temperature of the notebook in that particular spot. Now, with that said, you don't touch it here, although it does feel very warm to the touch, but oh, look at that, me touching it reduced the temperature. That's awesome. But we are going to take some temperatures at other places where it might be more important. Next, we taped our thermal probe to the Q key, which is right next to the W key. So that's typically where your gamer is going to want to rest their fingers. And we found that to be around 29 to 30 degrees in a gaming load. The other place where a gamer is typically going to rest on the notebook is the palm rest. So we've taken another dab of thermal goop and taped down our sensor here, where we're getting anywhere from around 30 to 32.5 degrees. It does tend to fluctuate a little bit. So the temperature at least is quite consistent from the WASD all the way to the palm rest. However, that is quite warm and it will cause some sweaty hand syndrome. Now, years ago, the system manufacturers wanted to move away from calling these things laptops and switch to calling them notebooks, because they didn't intend for you to actually operate them in your lap, because that interfered with cooling. So when we are taking a temperature from the middle of the bottom of the notebook, you can see that gets quite toasty. Guys, this is a notebook, not a laptop. At 45 degrees, 46 degrees now, the heat being transferred into your lap is quite toasty. So while you're gonna get some sweaty hand syndrome going on up at the top left here on the keyboard, Razer has effectively kept the heat mostly away from the top of the notebook. However, on the bottom, it gets quite warm. So I'm going to show you once again where that thermal probe was affixed. The closer we get to this edge, where the heat is actually being exhausted, the more dramatic the temperature increase is. So right near your knees is where it would run the hottest. With all of that said, the Edge 14 is an absolute marvel of engineering, and it is a miracle that a company that's known best for gaming mice and gaming keyboards in only a couple of product iterations managed to come out with this. With that said, it's a couple grand. Personally, I'll be waiting for the next gen when it's this, maybe runs a little bit cooler, or maybe doesn't, maybe has a little bit more performance, comes with an IPS screen, and then we're really talking about taking some of my money, because that's probably going to happen. I understand why they used a TN panel. They do tend to have faster response times, which for some gamers is more important, but I personally find the richer colors a more engaging experience versus the faster response times of a TN. And with that said, IPS panels also do cost more. Don't forget to subscribe to Linus Tech Tips, guys. Leave a comment under the video. Tell me what you think of the Razer Blade 14. And as always, wait, don't forget to subscribe. Yeah, like the video too. Do all of those things, because it actually is very helpful. So this is kind of a spontaneous teardown of the Blade 14. B-roll made a comment that we were just talking about the cost of this notebook versus other options available on the market. And I said, well, you know, is a MacBook a completely stupid thing to buy? And he kind of went, yes. And I said, well, okay, but it doesn't have nearly the same kind of horsepower as something like this. And he said, well, yeah, but it's also better built. And I kind of went, well, no, I don't really think so, because the level of integration that's going on here is outstanding. Plus, there are some things that you can do here that you can't necessarily do with every MacBook. So for example, there's an mSATA SSD. So the SSD is actually upgraded now, or upgradable. Now, while you can't necessarily upgrade everything, you can see all the DDR3 memory is soldered right to the main board. You can change, your wireless chipset. It looks like the battery should be possibly removable here. We can also see just how flat everything is packed within the inside of this notebook. So there's our 2 cooling fans right here and here. Each of them gets 2 heat pipes and a very small aluminum fin array. So this right here looks like it must be the GPU because I can see the dedicated memory around the outside of it. And then this one right here is the CPU. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to show you guys inside the notebook. And I guess this is the old Seinfeld double goodbye. But farewell again, my friends. There goes my phone.